We live in America, and there just aren't enough homes for everyone. There aren't enough opportunities for everybody to find a place to call home. It's not just about drug addiction or mental illness, but it's about real people facing real challenges in their lives.
Most that I've dealt with, they're not looking for a handout. They really aren't. They're just looking for an opportunity. The problem is once we have completely stripped you of your dignity and we have made you less than, that's a tough thing to come back from.
And we all think we've made it on our own, on our own without help of anybody else. And so then we get this kind of ego thing that enables us to say, well, that's them over there. I'm not like them. Human beings are nesting animals. When they become pregnant and they start nesting, they're creating a home. It is like a gut instinct for us. So when you are without a roof over your head, you're trying to figure out how am I going to make a home out of anything that I have.
We all would love to see these people housed, but right now the next step is, what can we do just to get you safe? What can we do to where you can rest a little bit?
We can't wait around for housing to just appear out of nowhere, that it's not doing it. So we need to begin having conversations with people that help them see a vision of home for themselves, a vision of more safety, of more security, of more thriving, of more connection and relationship, because all those things are the social capital that each and every one of us build in our lives that keep us going.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Lewis from Imagine Marketing. I'm joined by Pastor Scott, who is the founder and CEO of Matthew's Hope, as well as Brian Postlewait, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Homeless Services Network of Central Florida. This podcast is produced, filmed, and edited by John Burkett with Imagine. Welcome to this week's episode of Straight Talk No BS with Matthew's Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. Imagine Marketing is a full-service marketing and social media company, website design, photography, videography, promotional products, and even podcast production. At Imagine Marketing, we make it happen. Book a free consultation today. In this episode, we are joined once again by Brian. Thank you for being here, Brian, to discuss his recent concept of HomeMore, a simple mental reframe that helps people with compassion to respond with more wisdom and less judgment. So if you missed Brian's first two appearances, be sure to go back and watch or listen to episodes 98 and 103. Brian, before we dig in, can you start by giving people a big picture overview of what the Homeless Services Network of Central Florida is and does?
Sure. So every community in the country has an organization that's trying to help organizations like Matthew's Hope and the Coalition for the Homeless and others collaborate, share data and information, and to develop a strategy to kind of take advantage of our collaboration and cooperation in order to achieve and combat homelessness as best we can. I oftentimes talk about it like we're in the air traffic control room of the homeless service world, where we try to make sure all the planes have as many people as possible and that they're not running into each other, and all the information gets shared. So we also manage a lot of federal and state local grants that then go directly to organizations in the community to serve people.
And Brian, what made you want to come back?
Oh, what made me want to come back? I don't know.
You missed us so much.
Check my head, I guess, No, this is great. I love talking about the work that we're doing. I love that you all are creating a space where we can talk long form about the issue. You're busting myths that people have about people experiencing homelessness, and I don't find a lot of spaces where I get the opportunity to do that without it becoming argumentative. So this is a great opportunity for us. I'm delighted that you guys invited me back.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you. Brian,
if you don't behave yourself, I'll have you back again.
It's going to get very interesting now because I know Brian wants to come back. Brian, you recently posted an article on Substack titled More Home. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, really it's, and the term that I'm trying to use is HomeMore.
Okay.
And, but it is about more home. And So just my own personal experience with people on the streets is most people you encounter are not it's not just about drug addiction or mental illness, but it's about real people facing real challenges in their lives. And they are people that have stories of beauty and dignity and hope and faith. And so I've been trying to think about how do we reframe um, the issues that they're struggling with so that people see them and act with dignity and empathy and compassion. And so it's really about how do we help people who, are trying to find home have more of a home
Mm, I love that.
rather than just putting people into housing and, saying we solved the problem.
Right. So you shared the stories of two individuals in the article, Miguel and Janice. Would you like to recap either of those for our audience?
Oh, now I got to remember the stories. But
I'm sure you have many
yeah. I
stories.
mean, I think it's somebody that's living in a car and is trying to survive, who is struggling every day to just figure out what the next step is. And as human beings are nesting animals. We talk about it like that when women become pregnant and they start nesting. They're creating a home, and it is like a gut instinct for us. So when you are without a roof over your head, you're trying to figure out how am I going to make a home out of anything that I have. How do I make a home out of this bench that I have to sit on? How do I make a home out of this little space in the woods that I found? How do I make a home out of my car? And if I'm sure you could tell stories about how inventive and innovative people are in making homes out of their vehicles and all kinds of other ways. It's just about people trying to survive, and everybody has a different story. If you've met one homeless person, you've met one person experiencing homelessness. The stories are so varied.
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you bring that up because I hear all the time where, well, I've met several homeless people and they've decided that's what the homeless people look like. You've got to do this for a long time and expose yourself to a lot of different people to realize that there are so many different stories. Some of them are similar, but everyone unique in itself. I mean, but when you're talking about nesting, I mean, that's so true. I have literally, not so much now because now that here we've made it illegal to sleep outside, the camps have disappeared. There's very few, and when they pop up, they're gone within days. And but I used to go into camps that some of them were nicer than homes I'd been in. I mean, they literally had developed where they had a bedroom and a bathroom, and they had figured out how to build an outside shower. I remember one of my guys having literally a cable dish in their place and learned how to work it off a battery, and they could watch television. And it's interesting because some of these folks are very creative, very educated in many cases,
Yeah.
and they figure things out. But they figure things out without everything. They figured out how to live that way. Let me just rephrase that. They figured out how to exist that way, but they aren't really living in many cases because they're in survival mode so much of the time,
Well,
especially now.
I mean, if you go around the world, you know, and you go to cities around the world, usually it's the central business district that is like the place where all the rich people live. And actually, if you go out and keep going out, you eventually end up in the slums of the city. I mean, whether it's Rio de Janeiro and you look at the favela on the hill, or you go to Lagos and Nigeria and you go outskirts, and people are making home. In India, some of the most innovative, creative, like I don't know if you ever seen the video with the train coming through the middle of the slum, and everybody like folds everything up as the train comes through, and then everything goes back out. We just, as human beings, are trying to make our way in the world. And you know that if you've ever watched a zombie movie or something like that, because that is the whole story, is how do we build safety and security and a life of our when everything around us is going to pot.
Yeah. You pointed out that people experiencing homelessness are still making home in some capacity. Why is this so hard for the public to recognize?
Man, I I I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't have the we are story people, right? And we see the world through stories. And I can't think I think part of it is the American quest for riches and the kind of that pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and we all think we've made it on our own on our own without help of anybody else. And so then we get this kind of ego thing that enables us to say, well, that's them over there. I'm not like them.
Right.
And maybe that's been around forever, but I think that we have a unique challenge in this country to kind of undo these founding stories that are not quite true, because all of us stand on the backs of people that have walked this
Well,
world
and
before us.
there, I will say this too, and one thing I appreciate Brian for is the fact that he has been pretty bold in sharing his thoughts of injustice and what have you. And it's tough, even in my position, because what happens is with us, we're supported by the general population, and you try not to step on too many toes, but it's really hard to do what we do without stepping on toes. And there's these huge false narratives. I'm going to give you an example that just happened in the last 2 days. We had a girl come in, young girl. My guess is she looked like she was probably gorgeous at one time. Pretty beaten up by life right now, but she was sleeping on the, you'd have to see our property, but she was right. And I went up to her and she wouldn't respond to me at all. And part of me kind of was like, what the hell's wrong with you? You know? And so I just finally said, I can't let you stay out here. I need you to come up. So she came up and I went to Charlene and Sarah and a couple of our advocates. And I said, try to speak with her. The challenge is that she, something's happened to her clearly, because we even went back and looked at her social media, and there was a change that happened in this woman about 6 months ago, from what you saw and what you're seeing now. Well, what's interesting is she was arrested in Titusville, and she was arrested for tagging churches and stuff. In other words, graffiti. Mm. What she did, here was her tag. She put her real name. That's a call for help. And in the news, what's being pushed out is that this transient woman was defacing church property. She was, and that was not right. But if you saw what we saw, which they have not seen, and they're not going to look for it, we have someone who we think is escaping some type of abuse.
Yeah.
And something happened to her, and she's crying for help, but she's afraid of everything. This woman looked afraid, especially me as a man. That's why I made sure we get the women involved. And that's a perfect example. We have made a story that it's true, but it's not true. Yes, she's transient. She's not from the area. Yes, she did deface property. Yeah, but let's tell the rest of the story. And then, unfortunately, we run into areas that we can't say certain things. Okay, I can't sit there and say, you know, it gets tricky because we always seem to look for a reason and the worst. Yeah. A reason and the worst, rather than, you know, I used to say to people, when you see someone, have you ever just stopped and said, what could have happened to that person that that living like that became acceptable?
Yeah. So the challenge then is, how do you help that woman on a journey towards home? And is it going to be by making sure that every place she tries to nest is not a place that she can call home? Mm-hmm. Can't be here. Can't be there. Can't be anywhere. Or do you come alongside that person and create a sense of safety and connectedness and relational hope and each day worked to move her closer to home. And so the story I tell in my article is, the gentleman who's living in his car, and you asked him, what would more home look like for you today? And he said, well, I just need a place where I can park my car,
Mhm.
where I feel safe at night, and I don't feel like my car is going to get towed if I leave it, or that somebody's going to come along and knock on my window and wake me up, and where everything I have is wet in the morning. And so a little bit of safety brings the adrenaline down, right? The sense of fight or flight. It enables the executive functioning in our brains to work with a little more reliability, and enables us to think about what that next step is. Because ultimately, homelessness only ends when someone finds a home. That's what the word actually indicates, right? And for some folks, that is a journey, because we live in America and there just aren't enough homes for everyone. There aren't enough opportunities for everybody to find a place to call home.
And in that story, he didn't even say having a house I can go to.
That's right.
It was enough for him to say, what does home look like? A safe place to park my car so I can sleep at night and my stuff doesn't get destroyed or stolen. That's such a simple request.
And that goes to something that you and I have talked about before, is that how often, regardless of mental health, addiction, personal trauma, whatever, how many people you run into who have such dignity on the streets, who in themselves want to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
They're not looking for a handout.
No.
Right?
And often will refuse. Give it. And here's what they say. Give it to someone who needs it more than me. Well, are you hungry? Yeah, but that guy over there, I know he hasn't eaten in days. Give it to him. We hear it every day.
So in the summary of your article, you listed a few things you felt these stories revealed. Let's go through them one at a time. And Scott, I would love to get your reaction.
I'm going to touch on one other thing while we're here too, because mental health plays a big part in this. And let's separate mental illness with mental health. Okay, mental illness, yeah, full-blown schizophrenia, yeah, that's a big challenge. We deal with that also. I'm talking about the level of anxiety the homeless population in general is acting. I used to tell people, if you didn't have a mental health issue before you became homeless, you will once you become homeless. Now, some of that could be satisfied by simple counseling. Some of that 20 milligrams of Zoloft would change their life. There's all different things. Mm-hmm. The current administration just recently made a decision to cut back money for the very first thing they said they were going to put money towards, which was mental health care and things like that. They've cut it off. So every time we turn around and we think, okay, that sounds reasonable, boom, we cut that off too. So I don't want that to be left out of the conversation, because there is only so much, only 6.2% of our budget is taxpayer funded out of a $15 million budget. Okay. When you start getting into mental health care and things like that, you've got to have support there, up over and above. And so when you just hear it's disappearing, and I no longer have a partner to call, I can't do it myself, I'm not funded to do it, that plays a huge part here. So I just want to touch on that briefly, because that is something that's recently happened in just the last month. And people need to know about it, because when they sit there and complain about it, when they complain about that guy walking down the street talking to himself, whatever the case is, or calling himself the Messiah, as we heard the other day in our location. And then you say, well, the problem is you want us to do something about it, but no funding has been made available. So what would you like us to do? Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly, because that has got me wired up pretty tight over the last few weeks since these kind of things have happened.
Yeah, that's definitely something.
So you had a question.
I do. So I would like you to go through these one at a time. So more home comes before full home. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, for somebody that's on the streets, that might be moving from being on a bench to a tent, and maybe from a tent to an emergency shelter. And and from an emergency shelter to a transitional housing program or to a supportive housing program of some kind, to where they can stabilize their mental health and maybe find work once they've stabilized and try to build a life, have a community, have connections with others, have neighbors that are longer than just a few days, and so it's about building these rungs of competency. Now, in our community, I mean, I think the focus over the last few years has really been about, how do we move people into housing? I still really believe that's very important. But I think that when you have people that are on the streets, we can't wait around for housing to just appear out of nowhere that it's not doing it. So we need to begin having conversations with people that help them see a vision of home for themselves, a vision of more safety, of more security, of more thriving, of more connection and relationship, because all those things are the social capital that each and every one of us build in our lives that keep us going. And that the cause of disintegration in our own lives is when we don't have people, institutions, connections around us to help us when inevitably life takes a wrong turn.
Yeah.
Not everybody got born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And unfortunately, and people won't say it, I will, because, we have leadership that were born with silver spoons in their mouth. They don't know how to relate at all to what we're talking about. We have people making decisions that have never once sat down with someone like myself or Brian and said, "What do you think? You're in the middle of you're in the middle of this thing up to your neck in it every day." No, it's a very rare thing that someone asks. I've been doing this for over 20 years. 16 is Matthew's Hope, and I'm rarely asked by someone who can actually help persuade policy. What do you think? That's why Matthew's Hope for so many years has worked so independently, because it was kind of like, I can't wait for you to keep talking about it. We have issues right now. It's like we all would love to see these people housed, but right now the next step is, what can we do just to get you safe? What can we do to where you can rest a little bit?
Yeah.
We're not asking for a lot here. We're not asking for a home run. Can we just get to first base first and then figure out what the next steps are? But you got to get the private, in my opinion, the private and public sector working together, and then try to get municipalities to talk to one another rather than having a different plan at every few hundred feet.
Yeah, no, and I think this it's about more than just making decisions to build more housing or build more shelters. Even outreach workers don't always get the picture, the vision of more home. We have shelters that can't accommodate. We talked about this before. What do you do if you're a single, if you're a man with kids?
You're done.
Without there's just no shelter for you, right?
I'm dealing with ones right now where there's no place to send you.
What do you do if you're a man and a woman, a married couple, and you want to be sheltered together? That's just not available to you, and so we need to be asking the question: how do we create spaces and opportunities for all of these unique life circumstances for people to gain safety and support, to be behind? And sometimes that might, we've been talking tiny homes, small homes for years. Nobody's been able to do it in Central Florida yet. I sure hope that we figure it out, because there's people out there working minimum wage jobs who are homeless in their cars. They need a place to start.
It's a fairly easy answer.
It's a really easy answer.
It really is. We have been watching our leaders talk about this for a very long time. I'm talking about, I've gone in front of the same people multiple times over the last 20 years and said, and I keep hearing we realize it's a problem, we're talking about it. At some point, we got to
Do
make a
something
move
about it.
because it's kind of like, California now wants to kind of clean up what's going on. They're willing to, now they're going to have to invest billions. At one time, that was millions, but it was okay when Skid Row was just a couple blocks long. Now Skid Row is just massive, and it's going to cost massive money. And every day that we wait, it gets more expensive. And a lot of what the folks that we're dealing with aren't asking for much, just a safe place that they can put their belongings, that they can, and most, in my opinion, people can disagree. Most that I've dealt with, they're not looking for a handout. They really aren't. They're just looking for an opportunity. The problem is once we have completely stripped you of your dignity, and we have made you less than, that's a tough thing to come back from. It really is a tough. And then you sit there and go, the only answer anybody tells anybody is not here. When our folks get moved along at night, and I've had some of them move 2 and 3 times in the same night, and they always ask the same question: well, where can I go? And the answer is not here. We're not going to tell you where to go because there is no place to go. Okay. People on social media say, well, there's shelters. There is. We have the same shelters we have had at almost the same size for as long as Matthew's Hope has existed. There's been very little expansion. The other thing is, what's interesting is most people think that shelters are free. That is also not true. Now, here's the next thing is there's limited space. So you got to be in line at about 2 p.m. to hopefully get the first spot, get one of the spots to get into bed for the night, right?
Well, I mean, this morning, it's tragic, and the Coalition of the Homeless in Orlando, they do an amazing job helping people find housing after they go into shelter. But I was speaking with a woman this morning who was in my neighborhood and needed to get into shelter, didn't know about challenges that were coming, and so what we found out is you need to be there at 7 a.m. in the morning, and that within 15 minutes, all of the open opportunities
Cool.
for shelter.
There's no way to work out.
Yeah, and that's real, right? That's real. Those shelter beds are full.
Yeah.
And so then, what do we do?
Right.
What do we do?
And all our shelters in Orange County are all located within walking distance from another. And I will venture to say, only because I can track the numbers, is we have more homeless in the outskirts, West Orange County, East Orange County, than we do downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I feel, and this is nothing against the people downtown, they're doing what they can do. I'm talking about, again, leadership and the general public, when you have to understand there is so much more to this place than downtown. And there's not an easy answer. And if you got to be at a shelter, we used to say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is more common. Now, during this weather that we're seeing, since the end of the year, again, 7 o'clock, it's done. Where do you go?
Mm-hmm.
And
that was 7 a.m.
7 a.m. Yeah. So now, but even at 2, what job are you going to work that you say to your boss, I've got to get out of here about 1:30 because I really hope to sleep in a bed tonight?
Well, and what person who slept outside last night is going to be able to get up in time in order to be in line at 7 a.m. in order to get a shelter spot?
Or even know.
Yeah, and those
they can't be close because they're going to get in trouble if they're seen somewhere, right?
Yeah.
They're down the road, under the bridge, waiting for 7 o'clock. Let's just assume that they are in the know. They're not going to be able to because they're going to get run out of there.
Can you imagine what it would be like in Central Florida if we didn't have tens of thousands of old hotel rooms for people to continue to exist week to week?
People have no idea.
No idea. It would be like LA.
And a lot of them are working people.
Oh, they are. They're all working.
Okay. They're working
2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're doing the jobs nobody else wants.
Scott, you talked about dignity, and dignity is not a reward for compliance. I want to talk about that. How does this differ from how homelessness is usually addressed?
I think there's a difference between some like old school trying to deal with an influx of homelessness with minimal amount of resources, where people try to control people's behavior by rules and this and that. And dignity was something that you earned by complying with the rules. These folks are some of the most amazing people you'll ever meet in your life. And I think I've told some stories at this table in the past, but I mean, the people that I meet on the street are people of faith. They're people of hope. They're people that are positive each and every day. So that doesn't mean they're going to have a bad. I don't want to over sentimentalize because everybody has a bad day, but I am so inspired by the people that I've met over the years, who live lives of great uh, hope and dignity in spite of what they've been through and what they're going through currently.
It's mind-boggling when you sit with some of these folks. You kind of really, even myself, I consider myself a man of faith. It's the only way I've gotten here. I jokingly say if it weren't for my faith, I'd be sitting in a lazy boy with a 6-pack of beer throwing cans at my TV. It's my faith that gets me going every day. But what's interesting, I've been off the streets for a long time. But you listen to these folks that have just been so beaten down and had their dignity stripped of them, and they really believe that their hope, their faith is something that has gotten them to this point, and they're hopeful for the next thing to happen.
Gosh.
And then we see the people who claim to be people of faith have now thought this through to where that you're a person of faith, but what Christ said is no longer true. And I'll just say this because as a pastor, I'll throw this one at you. All you those that are for everything that's happening right now, you're cheering it on from the church pew. Read just one piece of scripture, Matthew 25, 35 through 46. Just read that. Okay, if you only read that, come back to me. I will invite you onto my podcast, and we will then learn how you figure that can't be true.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to throw it out there. I can't, I can't even imagine pastoring in the church anymore. I don't think I could do it. I just don't think I can do it.
Well, I think there's a huge brain drain as a result of us allowing people to remain unhoused, right? Just some of the most creative, interesting, artistic, loving, caring, innovative people and we've said it all the time as we've had communities in this country that have been sidelined and discriminated against. It's a huge untapped source of intellectual, social, and artistic capital. And it's the same thing with people that are on the streets.
Yeah.
They could be contributing to our communities if we provide even a modicum of opportunity.
So there are so many folks there's nothing short of calling them brilliant. It's funny. I've shared this before. I'm dyslexic, ADD that's pretty controlled at this point in my life, a little OCD that's pretty controlled and at this point in my life. But I was able to learn, after dropping out of high school, I was able to learn that there were people that did great things that couldn't finish school because of various things like dyslexia and what have you. It was just too much. I mean, when they brought algebra, I'm a guy who mixes letters and numbers. Now you're going to mix them together. You people hate me. Okay. But algebra was my last thing after my junior year of football. I'm done because it would just be so overwhelming to me. The point being here is that when you look at the great things that have happened in just the United States, but across the world, but just the United States, of people that were uneducated, no formal education, people that had various disabilities that have created the things that we enjoy now and take for granted every single day. There is, in my opinion, the homeless are a direct reflection of the general population. That tells me we're missing out on a huge group of people that could literally change the world. Yeah. But because they can't shower on a regular basis or have a place to call home, or they, some people say they made a damn mistake. Who hasn't? Okay. There's that other thing, little pastor speaking up in your eye. Okay. Who hasn't? But that should be just part of your story. You shouldn't have to wear that the rest of your life. And the point being is that, I look at some of these guys now and I go, the difference between me and you is you got caught, I didn't. Does that make me better? No, it just makes me fortunate some way. Right. But we're missing out on creative, smart, intellectual type people that we've just cast aside as we have become not just a throwaway society on everything. We now throw people away and we think that's okay. And then we try to justify it because of our political persuasion or our belief system, which is completely out of whack. Sorry, Brian.
It's okay. Brian,
I'm along for the ride. This is all good.
Brian, in your article, you said trust is not infrastructure. What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, it's relational, you know. It's not to get us somewhere. It creates trust, creates new worlds. Nothing happens without the kind of relational connectedness and trust that we build with one another. And that's true when you're interacting with people that are on the streets. I mean, when you show up to an encampment, you may think that you're the person that's there to help. That's how you identify yourself. But you're seen by the person in the encampment as a danger because you're stepping into their living room, into their home, into their nest, into a place
Without permission.
without permission, into their the small place of safety that they've created. And so, I mean, these small gestures of humanity and appreciation of dignity are the kinds of things that then build enough trust for us to help people move to that next homeward opportunity.
And you said small material supports are not enabling.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, it's getting colder in Central Florida. People are suffering in the cold. I know it doesn't get as cold as it gets in Philly or New York or whatever, but people are ill prepared.
Well, 40-degree drop is very cold for us.
Yeah.
Well, I tell people all the time, it's a wet cold here. It's a damp cold. It's a cold that cuts through you like a knife.
But who of any of us who has a home wants to be outside when it's 30, 35, 40 degrees? Nobody. Yeah. A dollar here or a dollar there, somebody's looking to get food or even, God forbid they buy a beer as a way to cope. Like, some cleaning stuff, stuff to keep clean and to care for yourself. Whatever people and whatever is that they say they need, right? Not the assumption we make of what they need, right? It's like, what do you need?
Yeah,
I asked that this morning. The lady said, I talked to the lady, I need a few dollars to be able to get on the bus. I said, well, I have a few dollars. I can help you get on the bus. So, I mean, I think that it's not us assuming what people need, but asking people what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not enabling.
Right.
It's and the thing is what Brian's saying, and look, he knows that I'm pretty tight about how this works with money and things like that. There's a fine line there that we have to look at. I mean, do people become enabling at times? Yes, they do. But sometimes you get so caught up in that, you're going to miss the simple opportunity to help. So my things are when people say, well, I don't want to give money. And most of the time I applaud that. But did you ask them what they need?
Well, giving money sometimes is just the way that you get out of doing the thing that really needs to be done.
Well, it's
right? I can give a few dollars here and there, but not advocate for affordable housing or be upset when somebody tries to build a shelter in my backyard.
Or arrest somebody just because they slept on the bench.
Yeah, right, yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, money isn't always the right answer, and sometimes it is help beyond that. But I've read the Bible too. I remember some Bible verses about this, about how if somebody asks for a shirt, right, or clothes, and we're commanded. The scriptures command us to give without expectation of anything in return.
And I think that's the big one and I want to make sure what everybody just heard what Brian said, without expectation of return. The return you may never witness, but there's so much that happens. then it goes back playing the Bible thing. We talk about planting a seed. Maybe you weren't going to be there for the harvest, but you were there to plant the seed. There's so much about this. And I think the thing I get so wired up about, after seminary and all this kind of stuff is, I spent a lot of time learning the teachings of Christ. And, my favorite verse, and again, I'd lose at Bible Jeopardy. Okay, you throw me up against a couple of Baptists at Bible Jeopardy, I'm the loser right off the bat. But James 1:22, where it says, "Do not simply listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." Mm-hmm. There's so many things that were simple that were instruction given to us. That can you imagine that everybody that claims to be a believer, from the president down. Okay, I'll be a little more bold. Send me the nasty grams. I don't care. Let's just talk truth. From the very top down, if we claim to be in Christ, then what's our excuse? Mm-hmm. What's our excuse? Christ said, watch what I do, you do it. He says, do this, it will go well with you. My thinking is if he said this will go well with you, that maybe we want to listen to that. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Bible thumper. Never was, and I hate it. I hate those places that said, you got to listen to the word, and then I'll feed you. Bullshit. No, you're hungry. I'm going to feed you, and we'll go from there. Okay? If that's just who I am and what I believe. I just think that if we want to claim to be believers, then shouldn't it show in some way? Right. And often that way is something as simple as eye contact. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as saying, can I get you a bite to eat? Okay?
Remembering your name.
Yeah. Oh, my God. You know the biggest thing we hear all the time, Matthew's Hope? You came back. You remembered my name. Mm-hmm. You heard me. You saw me. Those are the four things that I tell my staff all the time. When we hear that, we have done the right job. Because so many people, again, I call them the goody two-shoes, will go out there and do one thing now and then they never come back. And so it's a shock to people when all of a sudden my mobile outreach team pulls up every few days and my buses pull up every other few days and takes them in for showers and haircuts and medical care and mental health care and everything else that we do. They're shocked by that. Mm-hmm. But if you look at our badge, our Matthew's Hope badge, every one of them says, how can I help? Mm-hmm. On our badges, how can I help? Their version of what they think they need may or may not be correct, but it's a place to start.
Yeah.
What do you think you need? Mm. Okay. Because there's assumption often is people deciding this is what you need, we'll fix you. Mm. It's so much deeper than that. Relationships are so important in this kind of work. But when you consider that Christ developed us to be in relationship with one another, okay, it's just a fact. Yeah. Okay. Whether you sell your own Bible with your name on it or not, the bottom line, what's in it is still the same thing.
Yeah.
That ought to get someone fired up.
Sorry, and Tracy's probably trying to pull this together, but I think in writing that article for me was about helping people take a step towards engaging folks that they may not have ever engaged with before on the person's terms rather than their own terms. Mm-hmm. And the belief that will change something, because I'm just flabbergasted at the fact that we're going backwards in this country towards less compassion, less dignity, and
lack of complete empathy.
So not to flash my own Bible credentials, but my favorite story in the scriptures is a story of the friends that pick up their buddy off the street and take him to the house where Jesus is speaking, and they can't get in because it's too crowded because all of the mucky mucks are around Jesus, and so they go up on the roof and they dig a hole. They lower their friend in front of Jesus out of the hope that Jesus is going to do something. And Jesus says, because of the faith of your friends, your sins are forgiven. Mm-hmm. And then to demonstrate that, that he has the power to forgive the sins, he said, "Get up and walk away." And that's what I think that's my challenge for everybody, is not to worry about the faith, the spiritual condition of the person that you're trying to help, but let your faith, let your love of God be the thing that provides a conduit or a pathway for someone else to find healing. Let's not wait around or have expectations that people have to do this or that in order to experience healing.
Right.
Let's just be people who give without expectation of return.
Yeah, I love that. So collectively, are cities doing more to help those experiencing homelessness create home, or more to prevent it from happening?
I think we're so, you know, we're as a community, we're in a housing affordability crisis, and I think all of us know that affordability is an issue. You know, healthcare is more expensive than ever. Housing is more expensive than ever. In order to find housing that's affordable, you have to live way out in Timbuktu, and then transportation is more, less affordable than ever. And so cities have a lot of things to worry about around affordability and creating spaces where every person, regardless of the season of life they're in, from childhood to middle adulthood, where you're making money, to being a senior where you're not making money anymore, you're trying to live. We have to be thinking about these things, and we're not paying enough attention to it. But the reason that we're not is collectively the public isn't demanding that our political leaders do that. Instead, we're rejecting the small help that some are proposing. You know, we need to build more shelters, not in my backyard. We need to build more affordable housing, not in my backyard. And that's a problem. We've all have to become part of the solution.
Definitely. So before we wrap this up, is there anything that you guys want to say in closing?
There's a lot of work to be done, and the workers are few. But I will say that we've talked about it in several times over the last 3 years since we started this podcast. I'm going to encourage and remind people every day that you have a voice, you have a vote. Right now, the voice is the biggest part. And that voice is, we need to be asking our political leaders at all levels, city manager, mayor, county manager, county mayor, state representative, right up from Washington, right up to Tallahassee to Washington. And it's real simple. This is the only question that you have to ask is, what's the plan? If there is a plan, what is it? Share it with the rest of us. If there's not a plan, after 2 years of putting 1365 into action, if there's not a plan, why not?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And put it on them to answer. And I do fully believe with my whole heart that we're in a place that if we start demanding more of how our taxpayer-funded public servants do their job, they will be forced into doing it. How our taxpayer-funded public servants are spending our money, our taxpayer dollars, they will be forced to do it. I'm not saying they're all bad. But you know what I am saying is they're ineffective at best. We got to quit trying to just vote with whoever sits in the chair next to us, and really sit there and think of what's good for all of us, not what's good for a few of us. And so that's where I would leave it, because if you get a chance to Brian publishes a lot of, he's a much better wordsmith than I am, especially on paper when he puts things online. Follow that, read that, and then rather than read it to respond, read it to hear. I think so often right now when we talk to politicians, they're not really listening to hear, they're listening to respond. It's like dealing with children sometimes. When you get after your kids, they're listening because they want to be able to give you a reason why they didn't make their bed. Okay? It's almost that simple. And if that insults somebody, get over it. Give me a call. I'll give you a hug, and then we'll talk. Okay. But that's just the truth. I just, my heart, I've said it before. My heart is breaking because there's people that I know and have trusted in my own life and believe are decent people that are saying some of the crappiest things I've ever read. There are people in leadership that I would carry the banner for them, that have simply become a stale piece of toast in a chair, and they've only got voted back in because of their past, not anything they've done recently. So I'm a little more brutal than some will be, but you know what? I learned a while back. I'm 63 years old. Life is damn short. And I had a decision to make as I was approaching 60. When you come to terms with the fact that science tells you got about 15 years left, that's a weird thing as I sit here, because now I'm down to 12 and it could happen tomorrow. Will I leave this planet better than I found it? And I think that if all of us listened to that and said, I want to leave what little bit I can do, but I do believe that when each of us do something, God honors that in amazing ways. And those of you that follow this all the time, you know I'm not a Bible thumper. You know that I cuss too much and I laugh about inappropriate things probably at times. But the reality of it is no, it's painful to see how we're treating our fellow man, the lack of empathy that we have in this country anymore.
Your life will never be the same if you engage in this kind of work. It will be more joyful. It will be an adventure. You will come to know some of the most beautiful people with some of the most beautiful stories you can ever imagine. Just do it. Get out and engage and take the risk of getting to know somebody who doesn't have a roof over their head. See where it takes you. I guarantee it's going to be good.
And often it's going to shock you how your life is better because people like the people you're talking to did something at one time or another, like serving in the military. Okay, that's just and we can go on about that one for a long time. We don't have time today to do that, but I mean seriously, when you know that vet that didn't have the bone spurs, didn't find a way out of getting in the military, he gave something, and that made your life better. And we can't forget that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for Brian for being here and sharing all of that, and especially your article. It's beautiful. Thank you all for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys next time.